Margaret Sullivan had been sorting through her late grandmother's attic in Providence, Rhode Island, for 3 days when she found an old photo album inside a cedar chest under layers of quilts and linens. The album had a leather cover, and its pages were old and fragile, filled with sepia photos from the early 1900s. Most showed people she did not know, distant relatives whose names were forgotten, but one photo stood out. It was bigger than the others and mounted on thick cardboard. It was a wedding picture. A young couple posed in a studio. The bride sat in a fancy chair, wearing a high-necked white lace dress. The groom stood next to her in a dark suit, with his hand on her shoulder. On the back in faded ink, it said, "Edward and Catherine, married June 1st, 1911, Providence, Rhode Island." Margaret looked at it closely. The bride seemed calm and happy, maybe 19 or 20 years old. The groom looked a bit older, around 25, with a round, friendly face and a solid build. Not too fat, but well-fed, like someone who ate well. Both looked straight at the camera, serious, as people did back then when photos took a long time to take. Something about the picture caught her interest. She had been researching her family history for years, checking records and census data, but she had never heard of an Edward in her grandmother's line. The photo was kept carefully in the album, so it must have mattered, yet no one talked about these people. She took a picture of it with her phone and shared it on a genealogy forum, hoping someone might know the names or the studio mark. Soon she got a reply from Dr. Helen Morrison, a historian at Brown University who studied early 20th century New England families. That studio, Blackstone Photography, closed in 1915. Dr. Morrison wrote, "They kept good records, many saved at the Rhode Island Historical Society. If you want to learn more about Edward and Catherine, I can help. Also, something odd about the photo itself. I'd like to look at it closer. Can you bring it to my office?" She had found something that interested a real historian. She took the photo out of the album, put it in a safe sleeve, and set up a meeting. 3 days later, she went to Brown University with the photo. Dr. Morrison welcomed her and took her to a research room with special lights and a high-quality scanner. "Before we look up the people," Helen said, "let me show you what I noticed." She put the photo under the scanner. As the image came up on the screen, she adjusted it. More contrast, sharper details, fixing the fade from over 100 years. Photography in 1911 was advanced, Helen explained. Glass negatives captured fine details. With modern scans, we see things hard to spot in the old print. She zoomed in on the groom's face, right on his eyes. Margaret looked. Edward's eyes were clear now. Around the edge of each iris was a gray-white ring, separating the color from the white of the eye. That's called arcus, or corneal arcus. It's cholesterol and fats deposited around the cornea. Margaret asked, "Isn't that normal in old people?" "Yes, very common after 60, part of aging, but this man is maybe mid-20s. Arcus in young people is rare. It's called juvenile arcus when it shows before 40, and it usually means a serious health issue. In young people, it points to familial hypercholesterolemia, a genetic problem that causes very high cholesterol from birth, levels 2 or 3 times normal, without treatment, which didn't exist in 1911. It leads to early heart disease, attacks, and early death." Margaret saw Edward again. He looked healthy, happy, a bit heavy, but not sick. Yet his eyes showed a hidden danger, a gene that would likely end his life early. "His extra weight fits too," Helen said. "People with this often have fat deposits under skin and gain weight, even on normal food. What looks like good living might be a sign of the disease." She zoomed out to the full photo. "This is not just a wedding picture. It's accidental medical proof of a genetic illness, caught by a photographer who didn't know." Margaret felt cold. "So we're seeing a man on his happiest day, not knowing he will die young." "Maybe," Helen said softly, "but let's find out who they were and what happened." They went to the Rhode Island Historical Society and checked records from 1911. They looked for marriage licenses in Providence in June. After 2 hours, they found it. Edward Thomas, 24, accountant, married Catherine Ann, 19, on June 1st at St. Patrick's Church. Thomas, Margaret said, that was my grandmother's maiden name. Catherine must be a great-aunt or something. That's why the photo was in the attic. In the 1910 census, they lived apart before marriage. Edward, in a boarding house, working for a textile mill. Catherine with her parents, who had a small grocery, both from working-class Irish families that did okay. The 1920 census showed them in their own home with 2 kids, Robert, 7, and Mary, 5. Edward now worked at a bank. Better job, better life. But 1930 was different. Catherine was listed as a widow, with her teenage kids. Edward was gone. He died between 1920 and 1930, Helen said. Probably late 30s or early 40s. For a man with no risky job in peaceful times, dying young is odd. Unless he had something like this cholesterol issue. They checked death records. On the 3rd day, they found it. Edward Thomas died February 14, 1927, age 41. Cause acute myocardial infarction, heart attack. The certificate said he collapsed at work. A doctor came, but too late. It was sudden. He seemed fine the day before. This matches familial hypercholesterolemia perfectly, Helen said. Young man, seems healthy. Sudden heart attack in 40s. The rings in his eyes warned of blocked arteries from birth. Margaret looked at the photo on the screen. Edward with a small smile, hand on his bride's shoulder, eyes with those rings that foretold his fate. He had 16 years of marriage, kids, a job, but his genes were killing him slowly. Did Catherine know? Margaret asked. Did anyone know what the rings meant? Probably not, Helen said. The link between ARCUS and cholesterol came in the 1960s. In 1911, no one understood. The Helen contacted Dr. Richard Chen, a heart doctor at Rhode Island Hospital, who studied inherited heart problems. She told him about Edward and sent the photo showing the ARCUS. Richard met them and explained. Familial hypercholesterolemia is common. About 1 in 250 people have a gene mutation, LDLR, APO or P, or PCSK9. The body can't clear LDL cholesterol, so it builds up. Levels 300, 500 or more, normal under 200. It clogs arteries, forms plaques. In the cornea, it makes ARCUS, under skin, fatty lumps. He looked at the photo. The ARCUS is clear in both eyes. That means high cholesterol. With his weight, likely 400-500 range. No treatment in 1911. Cholesterol's role in heart disease wasn't known until 1950s. Statins came in 1980s. Richard showed stats. Untreated men with this have 50% chance of heart attack or death by 50. Many die in 30s or 40s. Edward lived to 4, one longer than some. Margaret felt tears. He looked so well in the photo. Happy. No clue. That's the danger, Richard said. No symptoms for years. Then damage builds and the heart fails suddenly, he added. It's genetic, autosomal dominant. Each child has 50% chance to inherit. Descendants today might have it. That started a new search, tracing Edward's family to see if the disease continued. Robert and Mary from 1920 census. Robert died 1954, age 41. Heart attack. Mary died 1982, age 67, but had first attack at 45. Bypass in 1970, one of the early ones. Medicine helped her live longer. Grandchildren. Of 7, 3 died of heart disease before 55. 2 had attacks in 40s, 50s. High cholesterol noted. 1 died in accident at 30. 1 granddaughter alive at 73. Clear pattern, Richard said. Textbook inheritance. They decided to find living descendants. They could get tested and treated now. Statins could help them live normal lives. Through records, social media, and calls, they found 12 possible descendants. The closest was Patricia, Edward's 73-year-old granddaughter, Mary's daughter, in Warwick, Rhode Island. Margaret called her. Patricia listened, got interested when hearing the family heart pattern. My mom had attack at 45. My uncle Robert died young. My brother died 3 years ago at 58. Heart attack, high cholesterol but found late. When shown the photo and ARCUS, Patricia said, "I need testing. My kids and grandkids too." Dr. Chen set up tests. Patricia had LDLR mutation, cholesterol 387, some artery disease, no symptoms yet, 2 of 3 kids positive, 4 of 7 grandkids carried it, all started statins and checks. "You saved my life," Patricia told them later. Scans showed blockages. "Without this, I might have died like Edward." They reached more relatives. 19 tested, 11 positive, all treated. The work went from history to saving lives. Spro saw from a detail in a 114-year-old photo. Helen and Richard wrote a paper, Photographic Documentation of Familial Hypercholesterolemia, in 1911, a case study in historical medical evidence, published in 2025, 114 years after the wedding. It covered the photo, ARCUS, Edward's death at 41, family pattern, and living relatives helped. Reviewers liked it. Interdisciplinary work linking history and medicine. Media covered it. 1911, wedding photo save lives. In 2025, Patricia spoke. "My grandfather had no choice, but this photo let us live." It led to a Rhode Island screening program for early heart disease families. Free tests found 127 cases in first 6 months, many young, now treated. The photo now hangs in the hospital's heart center, with info on the condition and screening. Margaret donated the original to the Historical Society. She made a website with the story, letters, records, and education on the disease. "Edward was more than his gene," she wrote. "He was a husband, father, worker. His legacy is love and family too." Helen wrote a book on medical clues in old photos, with this one on the cover. On June 3, 2026, 115 years after the wedding, Patricia's family gathered at the hospital. They stood by the photo. 3 generations, tested and treated. Patricia touched the frame. "Thank you," she whispered to Edward. "Your portrait warned us and saved us." Edward stares from 1911, forever 24, beside his bride, eyes showing the sign that ended his life early, but, over a century later, saved his descendants he never knew. The photo became a link from past pain to present hope, showing that sometimes the biggest discoveries hide in plain view, waiting for a closer look.